You idiot. This is Michael Savage. I'm back live today, and today's show is going to be Savage's Guide for the Perplexed regarding the Ukraine. I'm going to give you my opinion and the opinions of others, including the callers. Later on, we're going to have a gentleman on who thinks that it's the Ukrainian neo-Nazis who have taken over the Ukraine. And I will remind John Kerry that the gentleman who was thrown out by the thugs was duly elected by the people of the Ukraine. So which side are we on? I mean, we say we're on the side of democratically elected individuals, and now we're on the side of the thugs who threw a democratically elected individual out of the parliament. Now we're telling Russia to stay out of the Crimea, which has been part of Russia for centuries. Of course, it was given away to the Ukraine in 1954 for reasons that are still obscured by Nikita Khrushchev, Joseph Stalin, excuse me. But the thing is, Russia and the Ukraine is the question today, and I'm going to throw this question out to you before I tell you a little bit of the background, what I think is happening, what I predicted would happen is happening, as you can pretty much tell. Let's boil it down. Putin's not going to walk away because Obama told him not to do anything. He's not going to walk away because this raspy individual from Harvard, John Kerry, is telling him that this is not Rocky IV. Who the heck does he think he's talking to? They have their fleet there. The people speak Russian. Thousands of ethnic Russians in the Crimea are protesting against the new government in Kiev. The new government that is lining up with the EU, the corrupt bankers in the EU, the corrupt big oil magnates in the EU, the corrupt IMF in the EU, are the people behind this turmoil in the Ukraine. And both Russia and the Ukraine were part of the Soviet Union at the time in 1954 when Russia gave Crimea away. Nobody knows why. But there's one thing that we do know, which is that Russian President Putin has no intention of letting the Crimea slip from his hands. Russia is staging military drills. They have 150,000 troops on the border. They have fighter jets launched in the area bordering Ukraine. And they're reminding the Ukrainians who really has the power there. What is Crimea? It's a peninsula of the landmass called the Ukraine. Parts of Crimea, including Sevastopol, are described as Little Russia. And activists there have vowed it will remain so no matter what happens with the rest of the Ukraine. The demonstrations going on in the Crimea today, where armed men took over the Crimean parliament building in Simferopol, Ukraine, Thursday. Now, it's interesting to me how Reuters opposed this. They said armed men seize government buildings in Ukraine. Typical neo-Nazi Reuters. The writers for Reuters are the descendants of Hitlerites, guilty liberals who still see things in the wrong manner. Let's look at that headline. Armed men seize government buildings in Ukraine. But wasn't it armed men who threw the duly elected prime minister out of the Ukraine in Kiev? So now that armed men who are taking back a piece of this nation, which they believe belongs to Russia because of its alliances, they are now the bad ones? And they don't even say the Crimea, they say in Ukraine. But let's go on with the story here. The demonstrations in the Crimea going on today show you the broad divide in that region, as well as the rest of Ukraine. Part of the area wants to combine with the West, the corrupt IMF, the corrupt EU. We hear it's freedom. Many of us know it's not freedom. The European Union is the new Soviet Union. You don't understand that. The new EU is a new international conglomerate of nations, very much like the ex-Soviet Union, being run by a bunch of perverts in Brussels who are trying to dictate to all of the ex-nations how to run their lives. The EU is no answer for anybody. And in fact, if elections were held in all of the countries that were forcibly made to be part of the EU, most of the people in most of the countries that have been rolled into the EU would elect to stay as their independent sovereign nations. Putin will not let the Ukraine slip from the Russian sphere of influence. Further fueling what can only be called a cultural and political divide in Crimea was a desire by locals for the region to rejoin Russia. But ultimately, Ukrainian and Crimean lawmakers intervened